Hello and welcome to Calibre Conversations, our online book festival where we chat to a range of authors in the hope of introducing you to books to add to your reading list and get you enjoying more books in National Year of Reading. My name is Emma and I'm delighted to be joined by author Sally Gardner, whose books include The Red Necklace, Invisible in a Bright Light, the Tindims of Rubbish Island series and the award-winning Maggot Moon and I Coriander, and those are just the tip of the iceberg. So first of all, a really big hello and welcome to you, Sally.
Oh, hello. I'm loving being here. Thank you very much.
So I want to start, if I may, with your journey to becoming an author, which I think it's just a real inspiration. And I guess actually it might not have been the first career you thought you were destined for when you were younger. So can you tell us a little bit about your early experiences and how that shaped you into being a writer?
Well, funnily enough, I did want to write my stories down when I was little. And I had a head full of them. And I used to tell my brother stories to keep him sort of in his cot. He was slightly, I suppose really now you would say he had attention deficit very badly. But in those days, no one really knew what was wrong with him. And I used to tell him stories, lots and lots of stories, mainly about a monkey called Tiddlywinks. And when I went to school, I was sort of convinced that it was all going to be all right. I would just learn to read and then I could write my stories down. And everything went tits up, really, after that. And I got to school and it was quite obvious to me that this reading lark was not really working at all. They put up a picture of a cat and they put up these 3 words, 3 letters. And I couldn't work out how that could be a cat. I mean, it didn't have a tail. It was a terribly small word. And it sort of moved all over the place. The C went backwards. The A went round the wrong way. The T stood on its head. Things never stayed still. And I, at 7, realized I was in a lot of trouble. I couldn't spell my name. My name was Sarah. And I had a H in it. And the H had gumboots on. And I never, and to this day, when I think about it like now, it drives me crazy. I'm never sure if it goes at the end of the word, the beginning of the word, or in the middle of the word. And I still have a block about it. And Gardner, I could just about do because it's like a guard and then a no. And I even sign it today as if it's sort of slightly schizophrenically divorced from one another. And then my mother's friend came. She was an actress, Sally Hume, and she met me. And she said, darling, you can't not have a name. You can't spell. She said, well, it's really, really easy. It's a big S like a snake, and then a little squiggle for an A, and then 2 L's, and then a huge Y to catch the whole thing in. I thought, I can do that. I can do that. And my parents refused to call me Sally. It was just I was Sarah, and that was it. And finally, I changed my name by deed poll. But I knew at 7 I was in a big load of trouble. And it got worse. It got so worse. I didn't read properly, or I couldn't decode properly until I was 14. Now, by the time you get to that age, I'd like to inform you that you are written off. You really are. I was completely written off. And I really felt there was nowhere else to go but up. I couldn't go further down. I was seen as stupid. I was sent to a school for maladjusted children. I had a hell of an education. And at 14, I learned to read. And my mother said if I could get 5, which were then O levels, I could leave this hellhole of a boarding school I was at. And I sat up all night. In those days, you were allowed 5 spelling mistakes. The level of dyslexia I possess that's almost like climbing Mount Everest, really. And I memorized everything, absolutely everything. Words, spelling, the works. And I got 5 O levels. And I got out. And I went to art school. And I went from the absolute bottom to where I was, Sally, to champagne cork, like a champagne cork. And I left art school with a 1st-class honours degree, which was phenomenal. And is the thing I'm proud of. Yeah.
I think that's
But sorry, I was just going to say, I think basically it was a problem with education rather than the problem with me. Education, as we have it for so many children, doesn't work. And no one is looking at this in the round. No one, I'm afraid, has the imagination to look at it differently. And I think until we do, we're always going to be in this situation where we scapegoat and discard too many children.
I think that it's really important to look at that from the very beginning, isn't it? That is where a lot of the situations could be changed for children and their futures, and you know, by people like you being real advocates for that, that potentially is where that might you know, kind of change the course of it. Really, it's also what you've said there is just not only a massive inspiration for anyone with dyslexia, but also for those actually of us that haven't got dyslexia. It's a real insight into actually what your daily, you know, life is like with words, and you know, sort of actually that was a really good description of understanding it for us. So yeah, thank you very much for that. That's excellent, and even more so. So from that period, as you said, you know, amazing to come out of that with the qualifications, and then that sort of spurred you onwards from because you went into costume design then as well, I think, didn't you? So it was a real creative element.
I won an Arts Council scholarship after that. And I went to Newcastle Theatre and I became a theatre designer. I did a set for Good Woman of Set Swan with 1,500 car tires. I was the first person to ever use car tires for that. And then but my dyslexia defeated me on sets. People started laughing at the fact that 6 is 16 feet. And this were more important than actually the measurements. But people who are dyslexic are very keen to put those who are like me down. You're going, oh, stupid. You see what she's just done. And it really defeated me. And I became a costume designer. And I was quite frustrated by it. I wanted to do my stuff. Yeah.
And you did, and so you've now got an absolute wonderful back catalogue of stories, and more to come. And they vary from magical and historical, and involve a real broad range of themes too, and topics. So that each of your books kind of takes the reader on a real new adventure, or causes them to think about and question what they already know. But can I take you right back to the beginning though, and say, what was the first ever book you wrote, and how did that story come to be?
Well, the first thing I wrote was the Strongest Girl in the World. I tried writing little picture books. I'd written I'd written The Nut Tree, a little picture book called The Little Nut Tree, based on the poem. You know, I had a little nut tree, nothing would it bear. And I took that to a publisher called Orion that was just starting out. And I really met the woman that changed my life. And she was called Judith Elliott. And she was an editor. And she is extraordinary woman. And she said to me, but Sally, you're a writer. And I said, well, you know, in theatre, my dyslexia was a problem. And I said, I'm very severely dyslexic. She said, sorry, so what is the problem with that? And it was like someone had opened a door that hadn't been there before. It had just been walls that people go, oh, she's different. And suddenly it wasn't there. Really chronic, my dyslexia. And so it was really liberating to go into publishing. Told, so what's the problem? Yeah. There was a huge problem. A lot. I mean, I still struggle with words and writing. I always will.
So with you've obviously not let that stop you in terms of the interest that you absolutely have and display in your books as well, and history plays a big part in several of your books, such as I, Coriander and The Silver Blade. But is there a part of history that is the most fascinating for you at all, and if so, why?
I love the Regency period in London. I absolutely adore that. And I have an amazing print of the whole of the City of London. I think Holbein, City of London. And it is absolutely my favorite thing it's a huge facsimile that I bought when I got the contract for I, Coriander. And I have fantasies, it's really big. And I have lots of fantasies about wandering over London Bridge, which I think really must have been the eighth wonder of the world. At the time of Queen Elizabeth, they think it was painted, brightly painted. Can you imagine seeing this bridge? We all think of it as rather because we get the Victorian when it was about to be knocked down. But actually, in its heyday, it had window boxes, it had balconies, and it must have been the most wondrous sight. You would have seen Shakespeare walk across it. Anyone of importance you would have seen going across it, including animals. And I think that is magical. Yeah.
Well, with that in mind, actually, so you're an absolute fantastic builder of worlds in your stories. So do you have any tips for any young aspiring writers who want to learn how to build their own worlds in their stories? And kind of most importantly, for those with dyslexia and other kind of learning conditions, how to get them down if they find that part difficult?
So I have lots of ways of doing this, right? And technology, finally, hello, is keeping up with our brains. And now there are ways to get our stories down. So I write on a laptop, and I call it now unashamedly my shorthand. No one can read it. That's fine. I don't want anyone to read it. I can read it fluently. Then I usually put it into, I tape it, and I do tape to text. And then I sit with it and play with it like stitching. I literally go word by word, stitch, 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 until I get the rhythm and the beat of language. So I think the thing when I talk to children about writing is this: we can all sing, everyone can sing, right? And then there is Taylor Swift or Beyonce. And you suddenly hear something in a voice and you go, oh, play that again. I want to hear that again. And that's what you're looking for in writing. You're looking for the beat of language. And so I always say to kids, do not worry about spelling. Do not worry about grammar. Do not worry. Just think of grammar in a very primitive way. People have got to breathe, otherwise they die while reading your script. So try and think of it like a beat. Da 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 dum da 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 dee 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 dum. Now put that into words. Find a way of getting those words to do exactly that. And that is the beginning of a voice in writing.
That is a fantastic tip. I've never heard it put like that before. That's brilliant. So you've also spoken very openly about your experience with dyslexia. What advice would you give to young people with dyslexia who feel quite discouraged about reading and getting into reading?
I think the problem with dyslexia is the non-dyslexic world. We don't have a problem. I think it's the way we are perceived, which drives me absolutely doula laddie, and the way we're talked down to. And that's got to stop. We're very smart people. We just have a different way of seeing. We're out of the box. So the way I describe dyslexia is lots of people get on a train called education, and they sit on the train and they go through the boring stations of it. And they do well. They come out, they do where they want to go. We get incredibly bored. We can't really work out why it's so unvisual, why there's no imagination used to teach anything. And we get off the train, basically wander off in our own planet. But when we join the train again, no one can understand why we've got such riches in one part and we're so poor in another part. And this baffles people instead of embracing it. And in a way, I think the dyslexic brain is almost the future of the way the future will be. We have so much to give, and we've had so many years of being put down. I've almost thought it became a human rights issue, the way we've been treated.
With that, actually, with what you've just said in mind in terms of creativity as well, and the amazing creative minds that a lot of people with dyslexia have. So if dyslexia actually had a superpower in storytelling, what do you think that would be? What's your main superpower for that?
I mean, when I think of a book, I don't need to know the full plot, but I need to have the feel of where my arrow is going to be fired into the wood. And I sort of have to know where I'm going with that. And then after that, I literally built my world round it to find where that arrow landed. And I see it. I mean, I love it when I get to a part in a book where I'm writing a book at the moment, and I actually can sort of see where I'm wanting to go. It comes into, it's been a bit foggy. All of it's been a bit foggy. And then suddenly you get this, oh, it might go foggy again, but at least you've got the whole feel of it. And I think I don't like plotting. I never have done, but I've got the globe of the book, if you see what I mean, the snowball of it. I sort of see where it's going to go. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And with just what we've been chatting about before as well, in terms of with children and how they're going to schools and they're sat in front of books which just are absolutely illegible for them. They can't access them in that way. Do you think audiobooks have a role to play in helping people with dyslexia with their reading, and if so, how?
Oh my word, audiobooks! I am the greatest champion of audiobooks. I cannot promote them strong enough. And I, again, have another beef with this, because lots of people who say, I've read a book. And if you read a book, it's different from audio. No. Let's just rewind that. People like me listen to every word that's gone down, every word. If I don't hear it, I replay and I go back until I've heard every word. And I define audio. I think people who listen to books actually have a greater comprehension, a greater understanding than people who often read. And there's no reason why it can be you can read and listen. If you love a book, it's quite good to listen and then look at it yourself and read it. But audio, it's a lifeline. It's bridges across this river, is a way of bringing you into the world. And unless you read books, you can never write. I mean, how many audiobooks do I have on at the moment? A hell of a lot that I listen to, going round and round and round. And I don't know what I'd do without audio. I really don't. I simply adore it.
That's absolutely music to our ears. So obviously we're massively passionate about audiobooks. Keeping on the audiobook theme, you've narrated some of your own audiobooks too. How did you find that as an experience?
Oh my word. Oh, absolutely terrifying. I did the first one in lockdown, and the whole studio was sort of like going into a spacecraft. It was cellophane and tape and masks, and and I had a wonderful producer, and he was Canadian. I think he was Canadian. And I said something to him, I'm really sorry. I think it was the first book I've ever done. I'd written it, but and he said, hey, but you got the word wrong and you've written it. I mean, that's a bit, and he laughed. And I said, yeah, I know it's a bit silly, but I'm dyslexic. And he laughed again. And the next day I went in, and he said to me, oh my God, I don't know what to say. I mean, I apologize. I mean, I really, really apologize. I mean, I'm mortified. And the poor man, he hadn't dawned on him that I was dyslexic. And he said, I said, it doesn't matter. He said, no, but I was making fun of you. And no, it really doesn't matter. But that was my introduction to trying to learn to read my own book. I thought it was quite good. I found it terrifying. And then I realized I got how many of them? 6 or 5 of them. I don't know if I'm any good at it, really. I have no idea. I don't listen to them. I can tell you.
I can answer that for you. So I love the Tindims of Rubbish Island, which you narrate, is absolutely fantastic. So you are very good at doing it. Is it hard to read is it hard to read your stories out loud anyway? So is it a bit of a weird experience, or do you just see it? Yeah.
Them all the time. So so that's another trick what I was going to say to children. If you write your story down, you will have remembered the script anyway. And you've got to be braver about your word. As I say, no one can read my dyslexic. It's all a mess. but you can read it. I mean, I can read all my dyslexia. I can read other people's dyslexia. It's fine. It's your private land. And then read it out aloud. If you want to get the da-da-da-da-dum-da-da-dee, you want to read that out to make sure your words did that. Or you want an explosion. You want to boom, da-da-da-da-da. Read it out loud. Half the problem with a lot of writers is they don't read their work out aloud. And so they don't hear the repetitiveness that they've used well. I know, because they don't see the ticks. We all have ticks in our writing. Mine is well. In this book I'm writing at the moment, it's perhaps. And it's, you know, it's these little ticks that you really got to get them out. And honestly, the best way to do it is to read out aloud.
And now the one of the things about your books in terms of the fantastic world building that goes on is they do appear very filmic. And so I just wondered if any of your books could be made into a movie, which one would you choose and why?
I think Red Necklace would make a fabulous Sylvain. I think they would just make a fabulous romantic, you know, young adult family film. I think, and also they're very accurate. I mean, I wanted to do the Red Necklace to teach. Sounds rather arrogant, really, but there's not a lot to help young people understand what the French Revolution is about. And it is one of the most unbelievably exciting things that ever happened in European history, as far as I'm concerned. In 1789, the Bastille fell. That is only just a small part of what then begins to roll. And it is the time when they stopped the clocks. They were going to start again. The world would start anew. And it was women were going to have equal rights with men. Women were able to keep their property. They were able to divorce. It had the moment of the world being normal. And then almost instantly, it was locked down with the guillotine. It is a fascinating period of history, and one that I still think we haven't got our heads around.
So, so with recent reports that we've got stating that obviously reading for pleasure amongst children is at an all-time low, sadly, we as adults, we're in a powerful position to influence that statistic and turn it into a positive story. And we've already mentioned that in terms of, you know, us as adults and educators and librarians and teachers, etc. So in the hope of inspiring others, what book or experience or story made you into a reader?
I grew up in Gray's Inn, where Dickens was a clerk in the same building he was a clerk in. And my father was addicted to Dickens. So I have great love of him, and I love the way he describes the play of language. And I think Great Expectations was, I still to this day, it almost gives me a shiver of the genius of that book. And then the other book, which I tried to read Pride and Prejudice when I was about 16, and I couldn't work out the name of the man. I called him Davy because I didn't know how to say his name. And this happened a lot to me. And then someone would talk about a book and I'd say, oh, I haven't read it. And I think, oh, but I have read it. But I didn't know the name of the characters because I couldn't say them. And I think really it was the discovery of Pride and Prejudice in audio when that really changed my life. And by then I had joined the Library for the Blind. And I got these, they used to have these huge cassettes that came clonking down, not necessarily in the right order. So you could end up with the end of the book and the beginning of the book and the middle of the book or whatever. And then the other book that really, I listened to the whole, oh yes, I got so addicted. They had such a huge catalogue, half of which I couldn't read because I was so dyslexic. So I ordered by mistake the whole of Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, which I think I'm the only person that's ever listened to the whole thing. I got completely addicted to it. I almost wept when it finished. Someone said, "Don't be ridiculous, Sally. How many emperors have you gone through?" I don't mind. Give me more, give me more. And then I loved Madame Bovary, and it was read by this wonderful gentleman, and he read it like this: Madame Bovary, Chapter 1. Da, 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 da. And I could never heard his voice. To me, all I heard were the words. And I remember a friend, I was illustrating then, and a friend came into the studio and went, "Are you listening to?" No, 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 shush, shush. And it was the bit where she, goes over the end of her. Anyway, I absolutely didn't hear the man's voice. I just heard the words.
I know I can't let you go, Sally, without just having a little chat about kind of your next offerings, which I'm very excited about. So the next book that you've got coming out is in the Pernickety Boo series. So can you introduce us to Pernickety Boo and also what might be happening in the next instalment?
Well, Pernickety Boo is an umbrella. He is an umbrella with a dog's head, and he has a mouth that opens, and he was basically an ordinary stick umbrella until he got put into a sorcerer's cauldron to mix up a spell. And he came out with a dog's head, and he came out able to speak. And he ends up on the Circle Line, when the Circle Line in London went round and round in a circle. And he listens to two old ladies saying, "You're so pernickety." And he thinks, "Oh, that's a wonderful word." And he calls himself Pernickety. That's the front door, because that's the beginning of a name. And then the back door of the name is Boo. So that's Pernickety Boo. And he ends up lost property office in Baker Street. And he's there for 5 years, where he learns to speak German, Chinese, I think it's Russian. I can't remember. There's quite a few languages he manages to speak. And he also learns the wisdom of lost property. And his great aim in life is to find a home. And he finds it finally with Sylvie Moonshine and her two mums. And it's a story of the fear of being lost, which I think we all have. The fear of abandonment, which I think we all initially as animals have. And it's the wisdom of this little umbrella and the bravery of this little umbrella, and a cat called Jim Jam. And Jam and Pernickety Boo have quite a few adventures, as does Sylvie Moonshine. So my next one starts with Pernickety Boo getting into a lot of trouble trying to drive a car. And he works out that his tips on the umbrella he can use his fingers. And it's about Billy, the neighbor, Billy Turpin. And Billy Turpin's family life is not a very happy one. And again, it's about finding home. What is home? And a huge adventure in it.
Well, I've read the first Pernickety Boo and I loved it, so I'm going to wait eagerly for that one. And just lastly, keeping on the magic theme, actually. So if you had a magic wand and you could wave a magic wand and change, there would be probably lots of things you'd want to change. But if you could change one thing for children at the moment growing up with dyslexia, what would that be?
That there was a different way of educating children. That we didn't stick with this accountant's education, which we've been doing since the medieval days. And I think we've got to stop it. We've got theatre. We've got amazing technology now. There is no reason for any child to suffer. We've got iPads. No children, as far as I do not understand why everyone has to jump through hoops at the same time. We don't in life. Why do we make our children? I'd much rather see a class of well-balanced, happy, socially adapt, non-bullying children, all getting along, all learning quietly at their own pace and no judgment.
That's a superb call to action to end on, Sally. Thank you so much for that. So it just leaves me to say thank you so much, Sally, for joining us. It has been a real pleasure to talk to you, and your journey into becoming an author will be an absolute inspiration to anyone listening. We've 15 of Sally's titles in the collection, with much more coming, and she's written something for everyone. So why not discover her books if you haven't yet, and embark on your own reading adventure? So that only leaves me to say a really big thank you to you, Sally, for joining us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Emma, for having me.